Welcome to this Subject Overview and Scrutiny Committee 1 meeting, which has been convened as a hybrid meeting. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed subsequently. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing it either from the Council Chamber, here at Civic Offices, Angel Street, Bridgend, or from remote locations. Some of you may already be aware that I have a condition called adult onset epilepsy, which occasionally results in me experiencing short absences or mild seizures. On the rare occasions that this may happen in a meeting, you should not be alarmed. And should I, as the Chair, experience one of these absences or have any other technical ICT difficulties during the meeting, it has been agreed that Councillor Amanda Williams will step in temporarily as Chair during the meeting. Please can everyone ensure that mobile phones are switched off or switched to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda, and I will ask the officer to present a brief summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Officers and members are reminded to refer to the page numbers contained in the public version of the agenda report pack. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their microphones on at that point. But I would ask that, with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all other times you keep your microphones switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference. However, as a trial measure, I would invite members and officers to leave their cameras on for the duration of the meeting. Whether attending in the chamber or remotely, if any members and officers wish to raise a point or question, they should click the raise hand icon at the top right-hand side of the Microsoft Teams window, and I will come to you in the order I receive requests. If you are here in the chamber, please switch on the microphone on your desk and speak directly into the microphone to allow those who are remote to hear you clearly. Please lower your hand once you have finished speaking. The instant messaging chat button has been disabled for the meeting, and please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from Scrutiny will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout its duration, and where necessary will mute those not being used. I will ask officers to introduce themselves when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. They too should ensure microphones are switched off when not in use. So I will now proceed to the agenda. But before I do, perhaps I can give a warm welcome to our new registered representatives, Miss Angela Clark, who is the Church in Wales representative, and Miss Samantha Lambert, who is the Special School Parent Governor representative, and to our head teacher invitees, Helen Jones, head teacher, Maesteg Comprehensive School, Mike Stevens, head teacher, Porthcawl Comprehensive, Sarah Johns, head teacher, Kevin Glass Infant School, Carmen Beveridge, head teacher, St Roberts, Ashley Howells, head teacher, Archbishop McGrath, and Stuart Farrow, assistant head teacher, Archbishop McGrath. I'll now proceed to item 1, apologies for absence, and I will now ask Lucy, our scrutiny officer, to announce the apologies for absence received.
Thank you, Chair. So I've received apologies for absence from Emma Davis, Early Intervention Locality Manager. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Councillor Amanda Williams, please.
Can I give apologies, Chair, for Councillor Ian Spiller, who's been called away on urgent work business. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Mr. Howells, Ashley Howells.
Yeah, apologies from Mr. Farrow from Archbishop McGrath.
Thank you very much. That's been recorded. Are there any other apologies for absence? Okay, I'll now move to item 2, and that's declarations of interest. If any member has an interest to declare in any matter on the agenda, please click on the raise hand icon. Councillor Joanna Llewellyn-Hopkins, please.
Yeah, I'm a governor at Comfrey Comprehensive School, and I'm also a teacher.
Thank you very much. Councillor Amanda Williams.
I'm not going to declare my LEA governorships, but I just wanted to make it clear, because of some of the questions I'll be raising later, I'd like to declare a personal interest because I have 3 children attending a BCBC comprehensive school. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Melanie Evans, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'll declare a personal interest, as I basically have a child that attends basically a BC school, with some of the questions that will be raised later. And also I'm a governor at Croisty Primary and Pencoed Comprehensive School. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Tim Thomas, please.
Sorry, yeah, similar sort of thing. Personal interest, governor at CCYD, governor at Bryn Melyn Primary, and two children in BCBC schools.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Llewellyn-Hopkins.
I forgot to declare, sorry. I have a son who is a pupil at a BCBC comprehensive school.
Thank you very much. Councillor Heather Griffiths, please.
Thank you. I am chair of CCYD and Falde Primary, and I have a granddaughter in Bryn Tirion School. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths. Are there any other declarations of interest? Sorry, Samantha.
I'm a governor of Heronsbridge School, and I've also got 3 children in BCBC schools.
Thank you, Samantha. We now then move to item 3, and that's our substantive item today on the whole school approach to emotional and mental well-being. I will now ask Joanne Bendon, the whole school approach to health and well-being coordinator, to present the report.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the invite this morning. I was asked to present the report by Michelle Hatcher, as I have been the whole school approach to emotional and mental wellbeing implementation coordinator since June 2021. My main remit is to support schools across Cwm Taf Morgannwg, which includes Bridgend, to implement the statutory embedding a whole school approach to emotional and mental wellbeing framework. The report that's within your pack was dated for September of this year. Some of the data may have slightly changed moving forward, because obviously the schools have come back now in September, and we're working quite heavily with the schools. So I've just wanted to raise that the report was written at the beginning of September. So just as an overview, so that for those that are not aware, the statutory framework on embedding a whole school approach to emotional and mental wellbeing was published back in 2021 in March, and as a result they commissioned Public Health Wales to develop a self-evaluation tool for schools that would help to support the implementation of that framework. Across Wales, there are 8 implementation leads to represent the health board areas. And as I mentioned, I'm the one for CTM. The purpose of the framework is to allow schools to scope where they are at the moment, using a range of data and evidence that they have to hand. Moving on to action planning. So identifying particular areas of strength, and then highlighted areas for improvement, looking at action planning and implementing those actions alongside the healthy schools practitioners that are supporting the schools. And the final step then is to evaluate what they've implemented, looking at the impact, and then continuing that process once again using the self-evaluation tool. The framework was to enable schools to, as I said, scope their need, map their strengths, weaknesses, etc. And they are supported by dedicated practitioners for each individual schools. Because within Bridgend, we have linked with a healthy schools team to ensure that each school has a dedicated practitioner as well to support. As of September, the beginning of September, 51 schools across Bridgend are participating in that self-evaluation process. And within the report, we have 4 phases of schools. For phase 1 were my pilot schools, and they came on board with me in June of 21. And they really were instrumental in looking at the self-evaluation tool from Public Health Wales, using it with all key stakeholders. So that would have been all staff, parents, governors and learners as well, to scope where they were. and they also fed in then to the national evaluation by Public Health Wales to tweak the tool. My phase 2 schools came on board then from April 2022, and I've just in the report listed those schools now. They are currently on the scoping stage and moving into action planning there, and we'll be moving this year into implementing those actions. Phase 3 schools, they joined us on board in September 2022. So they have completed the scoping stage and are now working with their practitioners to action plan and move into the implementation phase of the evaluation framework. And finally, the phase 4 schools, they have begun the evaluation tool back in the summer term, or have plans to start it in September of this year. So they've all attended an initial awareness session with their Healthy Schools practitioner, or a general overview with myself, and the in-school coordinator has been given time to familiarise themselves with the self-evaluation tool and the process that they will need to complete. So their next step then will be scoping to complete the self-evaluation tool with all their stakeholders. So the purpose has been, the focus has been to increase the number of schools engaging with the self-evaluation tool, or the self-assessment as it was formerly known, for the whole school approach to emotional and mental well-being. And there has been a particular focus on settings with secondary aged learners, and that's down to our terms and conditions from Welsh Government for our funding. So the activity that that's taken place within the last few years has been meetings with myself. So I've attended emotional and mental wellbeing strategic groups to raise the awareness of this framework and the need for schools to start paying attention to the statutory framework. I attend regional partnership boards, community action groups for engagement, local authority and consortia wellbeing group meetings. I've attended all the Healthy Schools meetings, both locally and nationally. I work very closely with the CAMS in Reach or SHINE coordinators and youth engagement services through the NEST framework. I also report back to the Children's Service Partnership Board, and I'm working alongside Chi Education, who has been commissioned to build additional capacity to support schools in the evaluation phase of the pilot. In addition to that, the self-evaluation tool and the whole school approach sits regular agenda items for Healthy Schools and regional meetings, local authority and consortia, the emotional mental wellbeing strategic groups and the NEST framework discussions going on in CTM at the moment. So we have a regular agenda item there. As part of raising awareness, I have delivered the following training. So each school has attended an initial briefing session. The invite initially was extended to all schools across Cwmtaf Morgannwg, and as part of the pilot, we had several schools join us from the beginning, and as the process has been rolled out, we now have spoken to all schools across Bridgend. We've delivered training to the local authority and in head teachers meetings just to raise awareness and follow through with what support we can offer as a Healthy Schools team. I have completed governor training with Central South Consortia. We have delivered to Central South Consortia improvement partners, support sessions for schools on staff wellbeing, which is one of the highlighted issues from the pilot. Additional briefing sessions planned for phase 3 of the implementation aspect. So going back to those schools that are now moving into implementation, just giving them a little extra support. We also have had CAMS in Reach or SHINE training and engaged with the youth engagement for the NEST framework. I have delivered 2 strategic meetings across CTM, just ensuring that all authorities are aware of what the highlighted priorities are from their schools. And I'm about to deliver an awareness session as well to the Mental Health Board as well. So on a school level activity basis, so all schools, as I mentioned, have been invited to engage now with the self-evaluation tool and have been offered support in its completion. All schools engaged have received full support to complete the whole school approach self-evaluation tool, and the support has been offered to schools throughout using a hybrid model in the following ways. So they've had individual school meetings as and when required, so either with the Healthy Schools practitioner or myself in the early stages. They have had in-detail guidance on how to complete the tool, how to use the data, and then moving on to the completion of the implementation plan and action plan. They've received training and resources were provided to Pathfinder schools as and when required. We've had presentations to all the senior leadership team or working groups within those schools. We have supported schools with the relationships and sexuality education through staff training, parents' evenings, etc., completely bespoke to the individual schools. They have email, telephone correspondence. We've developed questionnaires for the stakeholders. An example evaluation tool was provided by the pilot schools to support phase 2, and we have used that as a network for schools to engage with each other and share good practice. There was an evaluation tool with the guidance questions included for ease of completion, so that schools didn't have to move from one document to another. We brought it all together. I fed back to partners on specific issues, signposting to resources as and when required. We've developed training for the Healthy Schools team, again through staff wellbeing and in partnership with Shine. We've created some example policies for schools, and we are currently in the process of having feedback on those. Support sessions with various sections of the tools, including guest speakers from other key partners throughout the duration. And we've also held cluster meetings to make sure we're supporting cluster priorities as well as individuals. And then we had wellbeing roadshows then to support staff wellbeing more recently. So as I said, the data was sort of inbox beginning of September, and it just shows the number of schools that were engaged and what the priorities are. From September 22, there were 55 schools within Bridgend CBC took part in the Perform and Grow programme, and that was delivered by Sally Evans. The programme was linked to the Public Health Wales self-evaluation tool. However, the programme was not commissioned by Public Health Wales. It was something that schools chose to do within BCBC. So the aims of the programme was to create a high performance resilient culture, improve organisational clarity with purpose, vision, communication, achieve operational excellence, create strategic audits, and then develop skill audit and plans to build on capacity. The programme was delivered over 4 sessions over a period of 4 months. The implementation lead, myself, was asked to attend for an hour on session 4 to give a detailed view on how to complete the tool and with whom. And this then allowed the Healthy Schools practitioners to make contact and give additional support where needed. As part of the journey so far, we've had the opportunity to share good practice. So I see many of the schools that are highlighted here as good practice have joined us today. So Archbishop McGrath, Heronsbridge, Bryntig, Kevin Glass Infants, Maesteg, St Robert's, Roman Catholic Primary, Porthcawl Primary and Porthcawl Comprehensive would be the schools that I highlighted as good practice and engaging with the framework. And that is me done. I have put in with the report some of our snapshots of our data. And from that data, you can see in what priorities and what we have within Bridgend at the moment is leadership and commitment, workforce, and help and support services. So that's where we're focusing this year. Thank you very much. Any questions? I apologise, it was a very whistle-stop tour for a culmination of 2.5 years' work.
Thank you very much, Joanne, for that comprehensive presentation on your work. Perhaps I can begin with a general question before I bring in Councillor Martin Jones to supplement my comments, and then we can ask for your and invitees' views from our officers, our cabinet member, and our head teachers, which are online. Of course, this framework on embedding a whole school approach to emotional and mental well-being was published in March 2021 during the midst of the COVID pandemic. I think it's recognised that the COVID pandemic has had a significant detrimental effect on the emotional and mental well-being of learners and, of course, to some extent, staff as well. So while the decisions were complex and there were clearly significant risks of keeping schools open during the pandemic, including the obvious health risks, teacher and staff safety and community spread, for example, do officers, the cabinet member, head teachers online, do you believe that in hindsight, the decision to close schools was the right one, given that young people were affected by their inability to socially interact, which is crucial for their emotional and mental well-being? They weren't provided the structure and routine which would have provided stability for children during uncertain times. And of course, some weren't able to access vital resources like meals, counselling and special education services that some students rely on. So perhaps I can seek officers' views, and perhaps I can defer to the cabinet member or corporate director first of all to make some general comments before I bring in other invitees and members. So Councillor Blundell first, cabinet member for education.
Thank you for that, Councillor Williams. Obviously, should caveat, I wasn't a cabinet member during the COVID pandemic. I've only been in the post the last 18 months or so. It's undeniable that what COVID has happened to our society and to our schools and to our young people is left its effects that we can still see to today. I'm not smart enough, I'm not clever enough, I wasn't in the room with the Welsh Government or the UK Government when they were making these decisions, but I'm sure this will come out during the COVID review. Was it right, was it wrong? I don't feel I'm in the position to say whether or not it did or it didn't, because as you said, there are a number of different factors that would have gone into making that decision. And personally, obviously, I think we all would have just liked no COVID pandemic to begin with, but we don't live in that world. We just have to sort of move forward now and try and support these children as best we can through our heads, through the health board, through the work of Lindsay and Mark and Sue and their teams, and just try and build and get these children back to where they need to be, emotionally and structurally and educationally as well. So that's really all I have to say really on that.
Thank you, Councillor Blundell. Perhaps I can bring in Councillor Jones. I did mention that he had a supplementary question, then I'll bring in Councillor Llewellyn-Hopkins. Councillor Martin Jones, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. It's nice to see so many faces on the screen in front of me. Can I thank Joanne for presenting your report, Joanne, and it's good to see there is some progress within the County Borough of Bridgend regarding our compliance with the statutory guidance. I'm particularly interested, if I may, to pose a question, and I don't know who can answer the question for me, but what does our initial analysis of the self-evaluation process tell us about children and young people's emotional and mental well-being across the county borough? Are there any quick lessons or quick hits that we can pick up that perhaps could influence further policy making as we move forward?
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Who would like to pick up that? Joanne or Lindsay? Anyone?
I'm happy to attempt to answer that question. Our initial analysis from the national evaluation is showing that the priorities highlighted are around leadership and commitment is the top priority. And with that, discussions that we've had, it focuses mainly on staff well-being. Staff, I think, at the moment are particularly at low morale, and that's coming across in discussions. And obviously, that is having then an impact on learners as well. Because obviously, staff are not 100%, that's going to filter through. With regards to quick fixes, at the moment for Bridgend, I have worked very closely with Michelle Hatcher, and we've put in some staff wellbeing training from IACT, which is an accredited training from the Royal College of Psychology. And that training is to upskill staff in having conversations, not just with staff that are struggling, but also using those skills then to work around the family. So talking to parents, being able to talk to the learners, etc. So we are in the process of addressing that issue. From discussions as well, I mean, this is just sort of discussions that I've had with schools. One of the most challenging areas at the moment, and I'm not sure how we fix it, is funding, because many of the interventions that are being put in place to support or have been put in place to support young people are having to take a back seat because of cuts within budgets and job changes and that. So although it's not something that I can document as such, those are the discussions that we are having with schools at the moment and trying our best to support. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but hopefully it gives an idea of where we are starting to go with it.
Thank you very much, Joanne. Councillor Jones, would you like to come back at all?
Yeah, so thank you, Joanne, for that. And you make a very good point about raising the issue of staff as well. And it was very remiss of me, because I should have mentioned the emotional and mental well-being of staff, along with children and young people. So can we expect then an analysis document of what your work actually uncovers then, so we can get an understanding really of where we are with mental and well-being across the county? But so will there be some form of an analytical document for us to have a look at?
It's actually being constructed at the moment.
And is there any timeline for that?
I believe the team have said they're hoping to get it done this term, but we haven't had a final date yet. But okay, hopefully by the end of this term. But it's actually being undertaken now as we speak.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Chair, if I may, the importance of this document, of course, will be very, very important, because, of course, it will fall in line with our budget setting. And we're now at that stage, aren't we, at the end of the year, coming towards the end of the financial year, where members will be asked to make some very difficult decisions in relation to precept and budget setting, etc. And this particular document will be key, I would suggest, in relation to consideration when we consider our budget setting. So, Joanne, if this document was made available to members towards the end of the year, or perhaps at the very earliest, at the very latest, perhaps the start of next year, that will go some way to helping us help you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jones. Thank you very much, Joanne. Perhaps that can be recorded, Lucy, as a potential conclusion and recommendation from this meeting. Councillor Joanna Llewellyn-Hopkins, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just two questions. Number one is there were some figures given in Appendix 5.1 on page 5 that indicated that 15% of primary schools hadn't engaged. Can I just ask what's being done to promote their engagement, please? And number two, and I mean this most respectfully, when are we going to stop blaming everything on COVID and actually address the issues, please?
Thank you, Councillor Llewellyn-Hopkins. Who would like to take that? Joanne?
Happy to jump in again, if I may, Chair. Yeah, so at the time of presenting the figures, there was an indication that 15% of primary schools were not currently engaged. As I mentioned earlier, with the directive from Welsh Government, we have been asked specifically to focus on secondary aged learners. However, within Cwmtaf Morgannwg, I felt very strongly that all schools should be engaged. So we have opened it up, and I can confirm now that all schools in Bridgend have had that initial meeting. So we do have now all schools beginning those conversations with us. So we are up to 100% of schools that are on board.
Thank you, Joanne. Perhaps I can open it out to our head teacher colleagues who are on the call about Councillor Llewellyn-Hopkins' second point, I guess, and what your experiences are following the COVID pandemic, and also Councillor Llewellyn-Hopkins' comments about when we're going to move on from the pandemic and treat some of the issues regarding emotional well-being and mental health. So would anyone like to come in there? Helen Jones, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I sit on a board where representatives from the rest of the home nations contribute to look at lessons learned. And I think one of the things that kept being discussed was re-indoctrination of pupils. But the national framework very much talks about a sense of belonging that every school needs to create to get communities to buy into the school, I suppose, and make children feel that they belong. And that commitment is absolutely key. And I think to answer Councillor Williams's point, it's reminding our communities of the value of education, not just in terms of achieving qualifications, but of exactly as we've highlighted, of the access to support, to social networks, etc. One of the things I would like to raise is the fact that one of the greatest concerns identified in the BBC Wales report relating to attendance yesterday evening was highlighting anxiety as the reasons that parents are giving. Anxiousness, depression, etc. Now, I suppose the massive concern there as a head teacher is that it is the ease with which parents reference those conditions. And perhaps I'm going to say something very unpopular here, but that should be a medically diagnosed condition. And it's too easy, in my humble opinion, for parents to diagnose a child with anxiety when it really is just discomfort. I think we absolutely need to focus on promoting resilience, the perform and grow model, as opposed to children mimic what they see. And very much during the pandemic, there was an approach from high-profile celebrities about bleeding and grieving quite publicly about poor mental health, and children will mimic that. So I think it's absolutely important that we start promoting resilience. My mantra and our strapline for the school ethos this year is tough love and no excuses. And I think we need to start promoting that across the authority. Instead of looking for reasons why students aren't coming to school is not and having poor mental health, it is really challenging those and encouraging them to have strategies to cope better with it. So perhaps that's not giving you any particular answers, but I certainly believe that they've called it the shadow of COVID for a while. I totally agree with Amanda Williams. The time has long passed that we can keep referring to that as a reason for non-attendance, and it's about creating good habits to prepare our young people for a happy adult life. So I hope that contributes helpfully.
Thank you, Ms Jones. That was very helpful indeed. Councillor Llewellyn-Hopkins, are you content with that reply? I know Mr Howells would like to come in as well.
Yes, thank you very much, Alex. It is reassuring to hear. Thank you.
Okay, Mr Howells.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I just want to echo really what Helen said in terms of attendance and resilience. I think it's not a case of us blaming COVID anymore, but I think the damage has been done, and here we are now in that sort of period after COVID. And I think one of the big things we mustn't forget is that so many parents are now working at home as well. And if you've got parents working at home, whereas before that wasn't an option for many parents, if the pupil knows that mum or dad are at home, or granddad or whoever they live with are at home, if they're not feeling up to being in school, and obviously we want our pupils to feel well in school, but at the slightest opportunity, if they know that there's an opportunity that there's somebody at home or there's somebody available to come to collect them, since COVID, because of home working, they've got that facility, and I think that resilience has been taken away from them because they got that ability to sort of be collected or whatever. So I think that is a it's not us blaming COVID, but since COVID, society has changed completely, and the norms are now, in terms of what we expect of our learners. And again, what Helen said in terms of terms such as anxiety, they have been thrown around, quite often genuinely, but often without being properly diagnosed. And, we all want to support our young people, but I think it's crucial that, and taking up Joanne's point in terms of funding as well, we are all doing what we can to support the mental health of our pupils and staff. But unless we can fund things like mental health first aid courses for more staff and things like that, it's going to be very difficult to address some of the rot that's unfortunately set in because of COVID. One more point, Chair, if I may, just I think it's on page 45 and 46 of the framework. It's on page 37, 38 of the framework, but page 45, 46 of our pack. It refers to Welsh Government guidance in terms of senior teams needing to be aware of the stresses on staff well-being. And then on page 46 of our pack, it says schools' SLTs need to recognise the varied factors that affect staff well-being. And I think head teacher colleagues will all, I hope, agree that there needs to be a recognition of the impact of on senior leadership teams themselves as well. Because I know Joanne mentioned leadership earlier. I've been ahead for 9 years, my 9th year, and it's the challenges we're facing now every day linked to mental health and well-being of staff and pupils. They take their toll on leaders as well. And I think, we have to ensure that there isn't sufficient support there from a Welsh Government basis in terms of supporting staff who are, at the end of the day, we want to recruit teachers into these roles in the future as well.
Thank you very much for that perspective, Mr. Howells. Can I go now to Councillor Amanda Williams?
Thanks very much, Chair. I have got a question actually with regards to wellbeing of head teachers and support. I'll leave it for further down the report as we get through the report. I have got the questions that we had discussed in the pre-meeting on this initial report, but also it was touched on budgets by Joanne. So could I just ask about my question to do with the budgets as well? Because you said that budget constraints are obviously impacting on the support that's available for wellbeing. And as a chair of governors, I know this firsthand. That's where we've had to take our support because we've got a deficit budget. We've had to cut out all of this extra support in order to try and minimise the impact of the budget cuts. So I fully accept that this is going to impact on our budget setting for next year. But it's also the additional services that support wellbeing. I know school transport, for example, to go on trips is so extortionate now that schools are missing out on going to trips. They're missing out on taking the children out, whereas they used to be, because they cannot afford these trips. Parents cannot afford to pay either because of the cost of living crisis. So I think it's more than that. It's impacting on the well-being of being able to offer what we have done in the past to give some of these children. Last year, we took the children from Coity Primary to see the rugby matches, the children's rugby matches in Cardiff. It was only 3 people out of 2 classes, 60 children, had ever been to the Millennium Stadium, or whatever it is called now. And we're taking those experiences from children as well, which is impacting on their well-being. So I just wanted to raise that. But back to the report. You've got the tables at the bottom of page 5 and top of page 6. And my questions here were, we can see the funding, the grant funding that's been provided, but it has, it's increased 2022-23, but then decreased 23-24. And the counselling amount as well has decreased. So I wondered if we could have a bit more information on this. Why have we got less money when we're now discussing that well-being and mental health of children and staff is, potentially at crisis point? Why is this reduced? And what does that money cover? How many sessions of counselling does it provide? Does it provide enough? And if we could have a little bit of a breakdown, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. I'll bring in Councillor Tim Thomas as well on that specific point on finance, and then I'll seek invitees' comments. Councillor Thomas, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I had a couple of points, similar points to Councillor Williams. Looking at the, as she's already said, grant funding from the Welsh Government for emotional and wellbeing grant has decreased. My maths says that interventions and training, that has decreased by 29% year on year, counselling 8% down, and quite staggering, pupil referral units and education outside the school has decreased by 70%. So my first question was really, given these quite significant decreases, is there any alternative funding streams for these areas? And if so, what do they look like? How adequately are they being funded? So, for example, are we as a council, how much money are we putting into these areas as well? I was quite staggered as well, my second question, by the significant decrease in pupil referral unit grants. And I thought, surely this sort of provision is only increasing. So I wouldn't mind having some figures on the demand for pupil referral units. Is the demand, am I right in my assumption that the demand is increasing? And a similar question, given that the special nature of pupil referral units, is the support for children in those referral units ring-fenced, or are they facing double cuts from the cuts to counselling services and counsellor training? Are those cuts to counselling service and training, are they for the mainstream schools only, or are they being, if you like, double cuts to the specific nature of PRUs?
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Thomas. We've got a number of questions there on funding and finance then. Lindsay Harvey would like to answer this, Corporate Director of Education and Family Support.
Thanks, Chair. For the purpose of recording, I'm Lindsay Harvey, Corporate Director, Education and Family Support. Thanks for the questions. I'll try to cover all the points because there's quite a few there. First of all, with regard to challenging budgets, absolutely, that is the case for the local authority, for all local authorities across the United Kingdom. And certainly the picture the schools face going forward is one of challenge. So I certainly accept that. If you look at our strategic plan as a directorate, which was seen by this committee in June, I believe, this year, the number one strategic theme is around pupil and staff well-being. So we see this as being a very clear priority. And the reason I've mentioned that up front, Chair, is the fact that we are seeking to locate as much resource around that key area as possible. Now, taking you to the strategic plan, there's a couple of areas in there that will certainly help out some of these budget positions. So first of all, the need, and obviously we welcome Joe being with us today from Health, is to work very closely with our partners in Cwm Taf Morgannwg, just to make sure that all relevant support is received from partners within our schools. The other thing I think is important, this is referenced within the table at the end of the report, is how we use the funding that's available from Welsh Government effectively to support professional learning in schools, and also for officers as well, so we can support schools in that area. I welcome the fact that we've got Kath Morgan, our Principal Education Psychologist, with us this morning. Obviously, Kath's team, part of her work is to support schools in some of the very difficult situations they face. And also, in addition to that, Mark Lewis within Family Support, his team of counsellors will also provide that support. The other thing we try to do, and this is a common theme that head teachers will be aware of, is try to make use of the excellent practice that exists within our schools to ensure school-to-school support is relevant. So again, we use that funding effectively. And finally, and I think this is a key point, is to make sure that within this policy, and Joe has given us a good overview this morning, is we look within a policy to adopt a common approach so we attract economies of scale there. The question with regard to the breakdown with the Welsh Government grant, I certainly don't have the detail of that, but I can find that out from Welsh Government to determine the breakdown of that grant, and I'm more than happy to provide that back to the committee. And the final question, I believe, is to do with demand for PRU places. I believe Michelle Joyner, who was the head of the PRU with the bridge, is with us this morning. Yes, there is a demand, a significant demand on places there, but through you, Chair, it might be helpful if Michelle comes in just to give you an overview of where she's at with that.
Thank you very much, Lindsay, for that comprehensive response. Michelle, would you like to come in and add any supplementary comments?
Hello, yes, Michelle Joyner. I'm head of the Bridge Alternative Provision. We are currently in October and already we are full. We are to capacity for Key Stage 4 learners on site at the bridge. So, you know, we have panel next week. We have access to education panel next week. And I'm sure, you know, that there are going to be Key Stage 4 learners who have been referred by schools. And unfortunately, we do not have the place within our site to offer that support for these young people. We manage IOTAS provision as well, so off-site provision for pupils. But again, we are in the same difficulty as schools with budget cuts. It's trying to source tutors and appropriate provisions for the pupils to meet their needs. With regard to the counselling side of things, we do have a service level agreement to have access to a counsellor, but that has decreased. Last year we had 2 days of counselling from an external provider, whereas this year we are down to 1 day per week. We are fortunate that we do have our own therapeutic practitioner, but within a day, you know, yesterday, for example, the therapeutic practitioner saw 13 children, whereas an external counsellor coming in for the day will see 5. And when we have up to 80 pupils on roll, and all of our pupils need that emotional support, you know, you can see that there are constraints on what we can offer as a PRU as well.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Mark Lewis, would you like to add comments?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mark Lewis, Group Manager, Family Support. Just wanted to come back on the point around counselling. What you see in that report is a snapshot, really, and what we can share with the committee is a broader picture on school-based counselling. So, for example, there's been an additional investment in school-based counsellors by the local authority last financial year. So there's additionality in the system. So school-based counsellors are funded through core funding, RSG. And obviously the position you see there in the report, this is talking about the emotional wellbeing grant. And in addition to that, through the Children and Communities grant, there is money that goes into community counselling and a play therapist. So I think it might be helpful for the committee. I'm happy to supply that following really that broader picture. So there's a number of strands to this. So there's a contribution which is highlighted and you can see it's tapering off. But the broader picture, when you add in the revenue support grant, the core funding, plus the Children and Communities grant, actually is additionality in the system by way of funding, notwithstanding a wider conversation about some challenges in terms of recruiting school-based counsellors and people with that background and qualification, but there is actually additionality in the system.
Thank you, Mark. That's really helpful. If you could provide that information to the committee, that would be great. Councillor Williams, Councillor Thomas, are you content with those replies? Would you like to come back on anything? I can't see anyone.
No, it's fine, thanks.
So, okay, we'll move on now then to other questions. And perhaps I can bring in Councillor Joanna Llewellyn-Hopkins on her comment on all pupils achieving their potential.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to know what's being done. In the report, it says that it's important for all pupils to achieve their potential. Can I just ask, how are we ensuring that all pupils, not just the select few, are achieving their potentials, bearing in mind the different needs of the pupils? So how are we differentiating that, please?
Thanks very much. Who'd like to take that? Lindsay?
Thanks, Chair. If I kick off and then perhaps we can invite head teachers then, see how it works in practice. So I think, first of all, it's a really important question because obviously we want to make sure the support is differentiated at an individual level. I think there's a number of key steps, really. And again, the councillor will be aware this working in schools. I think the key bit that's highlighted in the report is with regard to a holistic approach. So we make sure, first of all, that it's everybody's business to support effective mental health in schools. and that requires all of our staff, and that's teaching staff and non-teaching staff, to make sure they're able to work with learners in a very nurturing way. And I think that's really important. So we treat learners with respect and we listen to learners. So pupil voices is obviously a key element in this. To make sure that works, there need to be effective policies and practices in place, and this makes sure that learner well-being is always prioritised. And all aspects of the school day, for example, I know head teachers are doing some really good work on this. In fact, Archbishop McGrath referred to as some of the good practice within the report, within the Welsh Government guidance on this, how they change their day to support the needs of learners. I think the key thing really is to make sure that within the learner voice aspect is learners are encouraged to actively participate in school policies and practices to make sure that their voices are heard. And look at all the head teachers that are present today and all the ones that I work with, they obviously amplify that learner voice to make sure that their needs are heard and acted upon. And I think finally, this is a really important one, is the need for equal partnership. So equal partnership amongst learners, amongst staff, amongst parents and carers, to make sure all voices are in the system. So we get feedback, not just what the learner wants in school, but their needs at home as well. So we have full wraparound support for them.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. That's useful. Can I defer to head teacher colleagues then, if anyone would like to make any comments? Helen Jones?
Yes, I think the differentiated approach is really critical. Not everything is going to suit all people, and I think that's very much then when it comes down to head teachers to work with their staff to adopt bespoke approaches. So we've brought in a corporate package which is called SCODAL. So we do daily check-ins with our pupils, because it's fair to say that children can have bad days just like staff can. So they're not going to be resilient all of the time, and there will be moments where they'll need support. And I think for the average child, that's probably appropriate. And that will be a drop-in session with a member of the pastoral team. Then there will be those pupils who really are, and I keep coming back to this phrase that exists in the framework, that sense of belonging. That's absolutely the ethos of the school. Wellbeing is not something you tag on or try and, every teacher's job is to prioritise that. If children aren't happy and healthy, they cannot learn effectively and can't participate fully in the life of the school. So we recognise that actually that's quite a skill set in teaching wellbeing, if you like. So some 7-8 years ago, our PE teachers became health and wellbeing teachers before the phrase was coined, actually, in the Successful Futures document. And so our PE teachers also teach PSE, and they also teach food and nutrition. So they're mini Joe Wickses, if you will, just for you all to sort of get an idea of what our PE teachers deliver. But it then means you've got the whole holistic approach. Our PE teachers know about physical health. They understand the mental health, and they're teaching strategies to cope with that. But they also then focus on how to eat healthily, which is something that, as you can imagine, in certain areas is deprivation and preschool meal indicator is a real issue. So that's, I suppose, the one size fits all. But this school, or my stake school particularly, is heavily invested in those children who don't feel that they belong and really do struggle. And that's where our bespoke approach means that we've just invested heavily in developing an off-site campus, an extension to my stake school, where those children who are really struggling to come into school will have lessons taught in the club, the NOVA, which is the youth club area. And as a result of that, their attendance has improved significantly. Now, it's early days, but that's part of what schools, and I'm not the only school leader, trying to look at the very other end, just how far must we go to create that sense of belonging. And I think, that's just a simple snapshot, really. I mean, there are so many things I could boast about today, as I'm sure everybody else here could, but it's just those are the sorts of things that we are looking at, to constantly look at how can we engage those students and support them to continue with their education, whatever that education may look like. So I don't know if anybody else wants to contribute there.
Thank you very much for that really helpful contribution on some of the targeted and preventative measures and strategies you're using in association with partners to tackle this issue. Can I open it out to any other colleagues, head teachers who'd like to contribute before I go back to Councillor Hopkins? Catherine Morgan, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Catherine Morgan, Principal Educational Psychologist. I think I just want to sort of add on to what Helen has said. Within the rollout of the ALN reform and the ALNet Act, And the sort of the central tenet of that is around person-centred, sort of pupil-centred focus. The amount of work that our schools have undertaken, it's been a massive, massive undertaking to actually move policy, procedures, day to day to move that focus. So I think when the question was raised about individual potential and what are we doing, I mean, the whole drive in schools is around actually how do we meet those needs on an individual level within our mainstream provision and curriculum. And it's been a massive, massive undertaking. And you know, the schools are doing an absolutely sort of sterling job where we're looking at individual needs. So as Helen said, whether that's an off-site provision, a bespoke provision, a differentiated curriculum, the amount of work we could be here for weeks in terms of what we're seeing through the local authority and through our work with schools to really try, whatever those circumstances are, to actually offer, you know, a whole. It's not just an education, is it? It's the whole kind of package in terms of wraparound well-being for our young people. So, you know, it's just to sort of champion, you know, the work that we know that's going on, but actually a whole drive to make everything, you know, and it's a massive, massive undertaking, but how to make everything individual for that young person. So whether that's a different curriculum, a differentiated curriculum, you know, an alternative, it's about how we are working creatively, and the creative work that's going on, you know, really should be lauded.
Thank you so much, Catherine, and it's pleasing to hear that you're taking that holistic approach. I'm sure all committee members would echo those thoughts. We'll go back to, we'll come to Mr. Howells now to make some additional comments, then we'll go back to Councillor Llwyn-Hopkins.
Yeah, just a brief one, Chair. Just taking up Kath's point, really, it's making sure our schools have got the universal provision right for everybody. But I think our schools, we've probably got more pupils now who are on bespoke timetables than ever before. I think whereas before you might have had one or two individual pupils who perhaps had different arrangements for different days and so on. I think all schools now are having to put in bespoke provision to be able to cope with the demands of certain pupils as well, and that in itself is challenging, you know, from a safeguarding point of view. But you know, as Kath has said and as Helen has said as well, I think the schools are, you know, doing everything they can to cater to the individual needs of these pupils, either collectively or then, you know, individually for those with particular needs as well.
Great, thanks so much for your insight there. Councillor Llwyn-Hopkins, back to you. Yeah, and I know you'd like to explore other things regarding the pupil voice as well.
Yeah, thank you for this. It's really reassuring to hear that so many provisions have been made. But could I ask Ms. Joyner in particular, please? I understand that the comprehensives are doing everything they can in putting different provisions in place. But what I'm wondering about is the really disengaged pupils. You know, the ones who you ask them what they want in school, you ask them what their views are, and they shut down on you. So from a PRU point of view, how are we dealing with those, please?
Thanks very much. Michelle, please.
All pupils who come to the PRU come through the Access to Education panel, as well as the CAMS panel. So we have kind of two types of learners under the umbrella of BESD. So we have the ones who are involved with CAMS for self-harm or mental illness, and we work very closely with CAMS. So we have monthly meetings with the CAMS therapists so that we are not doing something different to what they are receiving from CAMS. For the pupils who are not aligned to CAMS and come in from sort of the more behaviour profile, it's down to pupil voice again, and it is about very small steps. It's looking at making them feel part of a new community and finding out what their interests are and what their aspirations are, and trying to meet somewhere in the middle. For some, they will have off-site packages in groups of up to 4 pupils. for others, they will come onto the bridge site maybe for 45 minutes at a time so that they can engage in some basic skills work. And then for others, it is about assigning them up with a lead worker and doing something in the community. So it is very bespoke. And for some pupils, even when they are offered a place at the PRU, it isn't sort of, I'm trying to think of the words, it isn't sort of, you know, that magic cure, for want of a better word. It does take time for those pupils to engage and to trust, you know, the staff that I have to work with them. But it is all about the pupil voice, really, and moving sort of at the pace that the pupil needs to move.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle. Councillor Llewellyn-Hopkins, you content with that?
Yeah, that's amazing. And I would just like to say to Michelle that the bridge does a fantastic job, and I've got experience of working with some of your pupils in the past, and you know, you are a brilliant organizer. I just wanted it wasn't a criticism. I asked the question. I was just genuinely curious what you were doing to engage them.
That's great. Thank you so much. Councillor Amanda Williams, please.
Thanks very much. I think I had this down to ask later on in the report, but given some of the head teachers' responses so far, I was just wondering, because it's been brought up time and time again about well-being of pupils, but also well-being of staff. And I think to be a teacher now, you're not just a teacher, you're not just teaching, you're a social worker, you're a parent, because the number of parents who hand over their children and say, there you go, they're your responsibility now for parenting them, as well as doing everything else. And they give up on all responsibility. And it's, if anything goes wrong, it's the teacher's fault, it's this fault. And I think that needs to change. But also to school leaders. And I said I had a question on it. Listening to what you're doing so far with the children is phenomenal amount. You're not just head teachers anymore, you're business managers, you're managing finances, you're doing everything else, you're managing the school site, and you're doing all of this to ensure that all of these pupils, their well-being is looked after. You're implementing all of these rules and procedures that come forward to you. You're also trying to manage your staff and their well-being. And sometimes I think, particularly since COVID, the behaviour of children has changed. It has impacted on staff well-being when you've got disruptive pupils coming in all the time, and how you're going to manage that through behavioural policies and the things you've now had to implement as a result of it all. It's a juggling act, I know, being on two governing bodies. And then also you've got staff, whilst they get the support of unions, and the last thing you want is balloting for strike if you're getting it wrong. I just wondered what sort of support is there for head teachers, because I take my hat off to all of the head teachers in the borough, doing a fantastic job, and I just wondered what support is there for you as well as staff and pupils. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I can see Helen Jones has indicated she'd like to make comments.
Yes, I mean, I don't want to steal the floor, I really don't, but I think my head teacher colleagues, certainly secondary head teacher colleagues, know this is very much the focus of Welsh Government. I'm part of the Leadership Academy for Wales, and Welsh Government have invested heavily in identifying the areas that are most affecting head teachers and the head teachers, school leaders' well-being, I should say. And I think that's credit to them, because they recognise that it's quite a unique role. I think that we have our own professional organisations that we the biggest one in Wales, I think, is ASCL. So it operates in a similar way to unions, but it's more of an advisory body. I think private sector identifies it as social well-being, and I think we have that very much in our collective groups. So the primary, fed and bash, that peer support is absolutely essential to surviving school leadership roles. You are absolutely right. I think that the other thing that perhaps we're all very, very aware of, and I'm going to make rugby references here because it's quite topical, is at times I feel like Wayne Pivac. You know, you're only as good as your last set of results. And I think that sense of, of accountability can be quite overwhelming and terrifying and very, very isolating. So I mean, listening to your point, that and it's lovely to have that level of empathy from councillors. I think there is a huge amount that we can do. And even if you look, I'm going to say something unpopular, but I couldn't sleep at night if I didn't raise it here. I think one of the things that Welsh Government can do in writing very well-meaning policies is with 22 local authorities. There'll be different interpretations of that. But in everything that's written in that wellbeing framework, there is no reference to local authority and Welsh Government in playing their part in looking after head teacher wellbeing and school leader wellbeing. And I think there's just an obvious, everything is about what school leaders do to focus on improving wellbeing for everybody else but themselves. But there isn't that level. And I think there are certain things. One of the biggest triggers in the stress management document that is sent out to all employees and to identify triggers for stress is not being able to participate in decision making, for example, or being governed by decisions that are outside of your control. And those are the things that I think, most school leaders would find frustrating, that you are working within certain confines. So I think that's an obvious thing to comment on straight away. There's lots of things that are delegated and devolved to schools. The attendance framework will be another one. But there are things that exist at local authority level that will mean that school leaders, or Welsh Government level even, that would mean that school leaders cannot really influence or change those decisions. And I think that's something that there are things being done, but I think it's fair to say that you have to go and look for them. And there is a huge ownership on school leaders to look after their own well-being as well. I think that is something that comes with the role. You must prioritise your own well-being to be able to do an effective job. So thank you so much for your empathy. And I certainly will take that back to colleagues who are not here today, because that does mean a lot.
Thank you so much for your contribution, Helen. Ashley, please.
There's an old hand, Chair.
Okay, no problem. Thank you very much. I know Councillor Delahoo's wanted to come in on the pupil voice before we move on to staffing. So I'll bring in Councillor Hughes first to make her point on the pupil voice, and then we move on. Councillor Hughes?
Hi, I did want to raise a question on that, but can I also just go back to things that have been said by Helen Jones and from Michelle? And it seems clear to me here that we've got lots and lots of our children and young people who do need bespoke packages or alternative provision. And knowing firsthand children and young people who've had support from the Bridge and Yotus and that alternative provision, and it really works for them, and the impact that a lead worker has had on their lives, I just feel it's sad that we've got so many pupils that can obviously benefit from that, but it just isn't, that the capacity isn't there. Is it just down to funding? Because as we know, society, teaching, education has changed so much. And again, not going back just to COVID, but the pandemic, we've got children who can't function in these mainstream settings. And is it basically funding? Could we have double the children being taught Yotus or the Bridge, but the system or the funding isn't there? And I'm not an expert by any means, but I just feel that does worry me, because it's such a pressure, the budget pressures, and yeah, it makes me a little bit sad that children are waiting and there's provision that could suit them. So sorry, that just came up by the conversation there. But yeah, I just wanted to ask, obviously it says the partners and stakeholders should always involve the children and young people now to understand this framework fully, and a route for them to tell people what they think about these arrangements that have been put in place for them and what is important to them in that framework. So how do we do this? I know we've probably done it on a school level, but how is that done on the grand scale? And where did the pupils' voice feed in to any future policies? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Hughes. Lindsay would like to take this one.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the question. First of all, it is two parts really. The finance one, it is challenging, but it's not only about funding. One of the challenges that my colleague Mark Lewis has identified earlier is even when there is funding available, it's very, very difficult sometimes to attract the people who are suitably qualified and experienced in these areas. So I think it's twofold. Funding is obviously a challenge, but also getting the right people to be with young people as well. The pupil voice, obviously you've heard today some of the excellent examples that schools are engaged in there. A piece of work we've done recently with regard to the directorate, so this obviously is a significant part of work for the council, is to look at how young people have contributed first of all to our strategic direction of travel, and also then to operational activity within different settings. So going back to the strategic plan, we had some excellent feedback from Bridgend Youth Council with regard to our strategic plan. That was certainly very matured by the directorate and was fed into the plan, and the suggestions they made were acted upon. And also then with regard to school councils, I know that all the head teachers present deeply value the voice of school councils within their own settings. We then get feedback from schools with regard to ideas or proposals that the young people have forward. And then we make sure that it goes to the Bridgend Youth Council, it's shared at my senior management level, and also we're very fortunate in this local authority that elected members are always very keen to engage with young people as well. So I can certainly give assurance to you, Councillor Hughes, that it's shared at multiple levels and acted upon.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Councillor Hughes, you contend?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Winstanley?
Thank you. So I thought I'd ask my question on staff wellbeing at this point, as we had started to cover that in some detail. And I was really pleased that it was mentioned about what the local authority can do to support teachers, because obviously we know that one of the huge pressures on teachers results in absence because of stress and anxiety. And so obviously if it saves us money if we don't get to that point, if we're giving you teachers and the support that you need. So what further support do you need from the local authority so that you're able to both support yourself and your teachers to ensure their well-being?
Thanks very much, Councillor Winstanley. Who would like to take that? One of our head teachers, maybe? No of us. I'm sure you're not backward in coming forward. You're not the Wayne not the Wayne Pivac of Wales, I'm sure. Ashley, we'll go over to you.
I think it's crucial that all schools, that we all, on a practical basis, I think we all need to make sure that we are adopting, sickness absence procedures consistently, because I'm not saying this is the case, but we've all got colleagues in our schools who might have got, really husbands, wives working in other schools, and perhaps how one school deals with absence and in collaboration with HR officers and so on. I mean, it's a shame that we haven't got the sort of all-wheels approach to things like that, because sometimes as schools we are seen as being, we are trying to implement support for staff who are absent by by monitoring and putting things in place and giving them access to things like Care First. And sometimes we as school leaders are seen as being sort of unsympathetic sometimes, even though what we're doing is trying to be supportive. And perhaps when that isn't consistently being applied, I'm not saying across Bridgend, but perhaps in other authorities, it's sort of, it makes us look sort of sometimes being the sort of the bad people, if you like. So a sort of a Welsh approach to sort of absence management would be positive, but with 22 authorities, I know that's going to be difficult. Yeah, but it's definitely a challenge at the moment in terms of, I mean, from an Archbishop point of view, I've been in post since September 22, and I'd say staff attendance post-COVID is a significant issue. And I think, but I'm not sure what other colleagues are finding as well, but I think we are finding that, whilst pupil attendance is improving very, very slowly, staff attendance continues to be an issue. And again, we're not blaming COVID, but I think it's a knock-on effect in terms of, resilience of all and sort of the challenges that we're facing in schools in terms of behaviour. And we've gone back now to a culture of sort of increased accountability now from Welsh Government as well, now that we've had the sort of fallow years in terms of CDGs and CAGs and so on, and the landscape is changing now, and rightly so. But I think we're starting to see, you know, staff are struggling as well, but it's very difficult.
Thanks very much for sharing that experience. Helen, please.
Yeah, very quickly from me, Councillor Winstanley, and you said, what can we give you? I will name drop here. I won't apologise. I'm quite proud of him. My brother is the Chief Superintendent of South Wales Police, and I've been working quite closely with him about how they look after the senior leaders in the police force, and I've worked with the army, and it's just little things. I think it's to value the experience, I suppose, of long-serving head teachers, school leaders in particular. And I think in the police force, they recognise 30 years service. And this is not selfishly. I mean, as a public servant, it is very, very difficult, our job. We're front-facing. For the first year in my tenure as head teacher, I've issued a parents' code of conduct as a handbook just to guide parents in how they can best support our school. I know this is something, it's old news really to primary school head teachers who do that quite often, but because we don't have that interaction as often with our customers, let's use that phrase, I think it's been really helpful, but I've been quite clear in my expectations of them. I think we have seen a change in attitude, certainly because we represent authority, so we do get it in the neck, mainly via social media. I now know what it is to be trolled. But I think it is important that we recognise we are a public service in education, and just to be thanked for still being here and still giving it everything you've got, because my God, have you got to have a moral purpose to remain in schools and to serve schools in certain areas. And I think that would go a long way just to say thank you very much for all you've given. And it's a tiny gesture, but it is a gesture to acknowledge the role that we play. So that would be something.
Thanks very much, Helen. I think we would all agree with that. Sue Roberts, please.
Yeah, hello, thank you. Just a couple of things that I would like to raise. It's just that we have a number of network meetings with schools. I would think that kind of answering Councillor Winstanley's question around support for teachers as well. And so what we're finding in those, in the evaluations that we ask for at the end of the year, is that staff actually value the opportunity, if you like, to talk to their peers from other schools and other organisations and things as well, because that becomes quite an important support network for them. So like there is a head teacher network, there are also deputy head teacher networks, there's a head sixth forms, there's the Key Stage 4 leaders, there's the primary deputy head network, just as examples. And I think that's quite important. If I can also just mention that one of the events that took place last year, it started off as an event for SEREN learners, so the more able and talented, in particular looking at the sixth form, but we set up a peer mentoring course for them in association with the Bridge Mentoring Scheme. So I think 33 Year 12 and Year 13 students then have been trained in mentoring. It was a bespoke package put together by the Bridge Mentoring Scheme, because obviously these are children who are under 18 in most cases, and then the link with safeguarding. But the reason I mention that is because it's an opportunity then for children to talk to other young people and sometimes actually vent the things that are worrying them, and they can then signpost them to support networks and things where they need to. I just think that's probably worth valuing, because it's come out of some of the work with SEREN when we've been made aware of the pressures around exams and things there. These are children very often who are expected to get the highest grades, and that becomes with its own set of pressures. And so that's a way that we've responded to that, and thought perhaps you might want to be aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's really useful. Thank you, Sue. Mike Stevens, please.
Afternoon, everyone. Mike Stevens, head teacher of Porthcawl Comprehensive School. I just wanted to pick up on the signposting of support, really, for staff. You know, there's been a lot of talk about head teacher wellbeing, but just to give you an insight, really, with regards to the work that we would do at a staff level here, I think it's important to understand that we speak a lot about our own wellbeing as leaders. We're doing a lot of work at the moment with the SHINE project around daily check-ins, weekly check-ins with our staff at the end of the day, who are dealing with some of our more vulnerable learners and the wellbeing aspect associated with those children. So it provides that additional layer of support for those staff. In addition to that, I think it's worth pointing out that, you know, as Helen had mentioned, that the voice of leaders, but not just that, it's the voice of our staff and being listened to. I think that's really important. And some of the work that we've put together through the Our Voice initiative, a staff consultation group, a staff wellbeing group, to shape some of the provision that we're putting in place for the staff, almost as a, you know, we're listening, we're hearing, this is what we're going to do, is important. And that seems to have supported us as a school and shaped some of our wellbeing work that we've then put together. So I suppose it's twofold, really. What I'm trying to draw from this is, and I think it's important for members here to understand, is that we're doing a lot of work with our staff. We're doing a lot of work to support our staff, their mental health and well-being, who are supporting the children mental health and well-being, and we're trying to close the gap with a lot of that work. And a lot of that we're doing ourselves in school as well, via the alternative provision that we're trying to put in place. And we're funding a lot of that ourselves and trying to provide the staffing in order to do so. So an example here at Porthcawl would be that we do have a safeguarding and wellbeing leader. That officer is working with our children, but our officer will also provide some support to the staff. That officer will provide support for teaching staff, non-teaching staff, and also leaders to check in as well. And I think that's an important, just an important point to raise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike, for raising those points. It's really, really useful for us to understand. Thank you. Councillor Winstanley, you can tend to those replies. You're on mute, Councillor Winstanley.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful.
That's great. Thank you so much. Councillor Amanda Williams, please.
Thanks. I wanted to pick up on something that Helen Jones said with regards to Welsh Government, and they set this guidance and they come up with these rules, and then it's over to schools to run, sometimes without support. If we look at this guidance documentation, it continuously references what schools must do, but also governing bodies. And quite often I find I'm on two different governing bodies. It's often left for the governing body to make the decisions. And when you've got a number of schools, a number of governing bodies, each governing body is different. The decisions made are based on that school, so they're often conflicting. And I've been a governor in one school for 13 years. And there are some governors who've been on governing bodies for even longer. And I wonder, my question on this is, are we confident that all governing bodies are strong enough to support schools? Because I know we've changed how the selection for governors that's changed. I know with parent governors it's a ballot, but when you're looking at LEA governors, it used to be a certain system, and I know that has changed. But how are we making sure that we're confident that these governing bodies are fit for purpose to support the leadership teams in schools, and that they are equipped to manage the schools? Because quite often they're volunteers who might not have the necessary background, or may not have had the most recent training, because as long as you've had the data and the introduction training and the induction training, that's it, you're fine now for life. And quite often, just because you attend every meeting doesn't mean your input is valuable to that governing body either. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I guess governing bodies have ownership of their plan, don't they? So they do need to have the skills and the ability to be able to monitor schools' performance in improving emotional health and mental well-being of both pupils and staff. Who would like to make a contribution? Councillor Blundell, our Cabinet Member, would like to come in.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you, Councillor Williams, for your question. I think it's an important one, because governing bodies do need to have the skills and the understanding to be able to do their very important role. One thing that we've started back up in a more robust, or trying to get in a more robust fashion, is the Bridgend Governors Association. So where governors from across all governing bodies, all 59 plus 1, can come together and have those briefings, have those understandings. That has started. It wasn't very well attended, the very first one, but we are trying to keep that up, because we want governors to have that training. We want governors to make sure that they are being involved as best as you can. You know, I'm a governor on 2. One of my heads is here, Sarah, and I'm on the management board of the PRU as the Cabinet Member. So I understand how important it is so we need to get that trained. That's why me and Lindsay went away in the summer while he was on holiday and I was on paternity leave, and trying to put this together. And so hopefully more governors can come along to those things and we can advertise them a bit better if that's what's needed. But we're trying to get that up and running so we can give that extra support to governors. Thanks, Chair.
Yes, you work closely together, but you didn't go on holiday together. That's right, yeah. Okay, Councillor Williams, are you content with that reply, or would you like to hear from our head teacher colleagues as well?
Yes, I would like to hear from them to see. I know it's putting them on the spot. They're not going to say, yes, I've got a great governing body or I haven't, but it's what support do they feel can be done. So you're not just given the person that the local authority says you must have. They've got to be relevant to the post as well.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Helen, please.
Yeah, I think Central South Consortia, and we pay a significant amount of money for that service, have produced a self-evaluation toolkit for governors. And it's so for those of you who are serve dual purposes and sit on governing bodies, it's quite cumbersome, but it's very useful, and it does guide governors to enable them to identify their strengths and their areas for development, and then actively seek support for those. So I think that's a good starting point, because sometimes, it's a thankless task at the moment. You have to commit a lot of time to being an effective governor, and that's just in the pre-reading and upskilling yourself rather than just the meetings. So, I really do commend some of the governors, but it's the age-old question, or the age-old issue, isn't it? The people who often have the time may not have the skill set, and then vice versa. So I know Welsh Government are looking at this. However, as I said, to give you a practical response, that's a very good starting point to really be quite self-critical and reflective on where your gaps are as a governing body. And I think that's something that we have used to identify things that we need and where we need those. It would be very useful if we could give a shopping list to the LEA to say this is what we need in our governing body. But that doesn't happen at the moment. So it's about enforcing and upskilling the governors that you have got and are willing and able to support the school, and not just support, but hold them to account as well. Very often, that is the bit that's probably more difficult.
Thank you very much, Helen. I'll bring in Joanne now and then Ashley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add a little extra to Helen Jones's point there about the Central South Consortia. I was going to mention the self-evaluation tool, but she beat me to that. But on the back of that, then, Central South Consortia also offer governor training. So they look at where the gaps are, and then they could also support with training of governors in certain areas as well. So it's something for governing bodies to be aware of, really, that although there is that self-evaluation document, there are training sessions available then ongoing throughout the academic year from Central South Consortia.
Thank you very much, Joanne. Ashley, please.
Yeah, I think it's recruitment of governors is a huge issue, isn't it? Because the governors we all have put in a huge amount of work and give up so much time to support schools as lay people, and I think without them, schools wouldn't be able to function. But it's recruitment and just filling those gaps. I'd imagine that most schools in Bridgend have got gaps in their governing body, and I think the challenge for schools such as Archbishop and St Roberts and so on, as voluntary-aided schools, is foundation governors as well, which is an added issue we've got in terms of recruitment as well. But like Helen said, it's upskilling the ones you've got, and sort of wrapping them in cotton wool as well, really, because they're so crucial, especially when it comes to things like recruitment. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashley. Carmen Beveridge, please.
Good afternoon, Carmen Beveridge from St Robert's Primary School. With regards to the governing body and governors, what I want from governors is them to have a relationship with the school, and to get to know the school. So when we have got those difficult conversations, they've got the knowledge of the school. So we tend to try and get them actively involved in school life. We have class governors. They're invited to our assemblies, our worships. So as well as sort of like the meetings, and agendas and things like that. They can speak in an informed way about what's going on in school. Obviously, when we have our subcommittees, I try to signpost them to the relevant training, so they are trained in their responsibilities. But I think they need a relationship with the school and to know the school. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the contribution. Sue Roberts, please.
Yeah, I thought perhaps it was a good opportunity to plug the fact that we've got one of the Bridgend Governor Association meetings taking place this evening at CCYD. We've got 2 head teachers going to be speaking there about what they would want really from a good governing body. And so I can see obviously there are quite a few members of governing bodies on this meeting. I thought it was a good opportunity to just flag that one.
Thanks, Sue. I guess the problem, going back to Helen's point, is that first of all, we don't have enough governors, do we? We have so many vacancies on governing bodies, and of course we don't necessarily do an audit of the skills which governing bodies have to potentially plug those skills gaps. So is there any way in which the local authority can promote, further promote the role of being a governor, and potentially go out, not necessarily to tender, but try and promote where we've got gaps to people who can fill them? Is there any way in which we can perhaps do that in a more positive way and be able to attract those people with the correct skills or the gaps that we have on our governing bodies to apply? John Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We're happy to look at how we can do that through the BGA and other organisations. We do try and plug being a governor on our social media pages as much as possible. Obviously, we don't want to overcrowd the social media, as the social media people tell me. So we do try and promote it. And obviously, you all hear me every time you're all listening to Cabinet. You all hear me doing why you should all be governors. And also when we go around schools as well, I always make the joke, if you're not, I know I can see Councillor Hughes has put her hand up because she wants to be a governor at her local school, but unfortunately we can't at the moment due to the restrictions that we are working towards. So thank you for reminding me that, Councillor Hughes. Although I don't know if that was your point you put your hand up for. So we will try and make local members as well so they can have that relationship with the school that Ms Beveridge spoke about, because it is important and it is amazing to go around schools as well. So that's really what we're going to do. We are happy to look at it in more detail if we can and see where we can target, I think is the right word, those people with those specific skill sets to try and get into schools. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I think that's what I was getting at, really. It's about people with specific skills. So, for example, I have a communications, public affairs background, so you could that could be used to good effect on a governing body. Many people have other skills from the education sector and elsewhere, which could be of use on a governing body, not just necessarily parent governors or community governors, notwithstanding the contribution which they make. So we'll go to Councillor Llewellyn-Hopkins first, and then to Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. This is not about the governors. This is on about other things in that part of the report.
Can I ask you just to pause then, just in case Councillor Hughes does want to raise?
Of course, yeah.
Body, and then we can come back to you. Councillor Hughes.
Hi. Yeah. So currently, the school that I linked closely to as an interim IEB, so I have been observing the IEB meetings, and hopefully will become a governor when that opportunity arises. But I think what I just wanted to say from my point of view as a local councillor, and having worked in a school for many years and been a governor for many years, I think we need to sort of get communities to move away from the fact that they often think that the councillors have to be, the governor, sorry, have to be a councillor or on the community council or linked in that sort of way. So for me, the past year, I've been speaking to people in the community. A gentleman has gone in and helped to do the garden. It happens to be he's just retiring as accountant. We want people in communities to want to be part of a school governance. They might not have children in the school, like you just said, Alex, but the people with different skills that want to support the school. I'm finding a lot of the time now, as you say, that it's a big responsibility on governors, and some people don't want to take that role on because it is a responsibility ultimately, and it's a lot of time. But I think if as a counsellor, something I could do to help in my community and accessing different things and different people is to try and encourage people from all walks of life or all sorts of work professions that would they come and be involved. And then I think then we will see a different variety of people maybe applying to be governors. But it's essential that sort of the school isn't seen in isolation. It's the community and how we get that community more involved in the running of the school, as well as people who are education experts. Although we need those as well. But yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Councillor Hughes. Thank you very much. Councillor Jones, is this on governance?
It certainly is, Chair. It certainly is. Well, I just want to pick up on the point that Councillor Hughes has just made. Yes, like many others in the meeting today, I've been a governor in the Garrow Valley now for quite some time. And we are struggling in the Garrow Valley to get governors for a variety of reasons. I accepted a responsibility to support the director at Ogmore Vale Primary School to chair an interim executive board. And that was nearly 2 years ago now. I mean, this particular role was 6 to 9 months, 12 months tops, but we are slowly but surely going into 2 years. And whatever we try to do in the Ogmore Valley, I'm going to be quite blunt, we are failing miserably, trying to reach out to get people to be part of a governing body. And if it wasn't for the likes of Councillor Della Hughes, I don't know what we would do. So my message basically is this. We need to start thinking outside the box, bit of a management speak, and not look inward towards the education community. We need to look out at the community as a whole. We have to have reasonable expectations in relation to commitments. Governing bodies have subgroups. They're all time consuming. And let's cut to the chase. The best people are in work. They're the professional people out there who can support schools from a professional perspective, have their own careers. So their time is limited in terms of their careers, in terms of their family commitments. So it's a big ask for them to come along at 6 o'clock in an evening and spend a couple of hours to give us their professional expertise, whether or not it's in HR, whether or not it's in performance, or whether or not it's in finance. It is a bit of a conundrum, but my plea really is that we look outside of the educational community. I think we're perhaps a little bit too insular. We need to look outside and how we can reach out, I think, to communities. And as I say, the experience of Ogmore Vale should not go unnoticed, and it is something which in time I can feed back. But it's difficult. It really, really is difficult. And if you took away councillors themselves from governing bodies, we would have heaps of vacancies. Because I don't think of the 51 councillors in the chamber today, nearly 99% of them are governors in one or more schools. So if you took away that level of commitment, we'd be in dire straits. So perhaps, Chair, at the end of this meeting, this is perhaps one of the recommendations we could consider. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jones. Perhaps I can bring in Councillor Llewellyn-Hopkins in again now to, I think you'd like to raise staffing issues, don't you, Councillor Llewellyn-Hopkins? And then perhaps we can take a 5-minute break, because I'm conscious of the fact that we have been going for 1 hour and 45 minutes now. So, Johanna?
Thank you, Chair. Right, there's 2 points, 2/ questions. So with schools becoming more than schools now, they're social workers, they're doctors, nurses. What's being done to relieve the burden on schools of having to provide so many services, in that, are we training the staff sufficiently? And in some schools, I've seen some really good examples of good relationships between senior management and staff and pupils. I've also seen some quite bad ones. And my point is, teachers are leaving the profession in droves at the moment. I myself have lost 3 colleagues recently who no longer want to teach. What is being done to address this, please? Thank
you very much, Councillor Hopkins. Would anyone like to take that from their individual school perspective, or Lindsay Harvey would like to come in first as Corporate Director?
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, just to recognise the points that the councillor has made, they are really important ones. Certainly, as a former teacher myself, I recognise the pressure of being a school teacher is. Being a good school teacher, there's a lot of work involved in it. And just recognise the hard work of everyone who works in schools, because they do a remarkable job. And as the councillor has just indicated, it's not just being teaching, it's attending to all the needs of learners and the community and parents. So it's a significant job. So what is the local authority doing to support it? Well, without reiterating what I've said earlier with regard to how we're addressing the statutory requirements within the wellbeing framework, clearly for us, there's a number of key areas. First of all is within Care First, the occupational health scheme that we run, and all teachers are able to access that. We also consider a lot of support school to school, and how we support Team Bridgend is a concept we've coined in Bridgend, on how we support schools and enable other school people to support each other, which is very important. And also we consider ourselves to be a listening directorate, so we are there for schools, we are there to listen to the needs of them. So when issues crop up from time to time, we get regular feedback from school and trade unions with regard to issues, and we try to address them proactively. So again, much in the same vein as I said earlier, Chair, with regard to learner voice, obviously we think that staff voice is very important. We listen to that and we act accordingly, and also we encourage staff to make themselves or to take benefit of some of the facilities that are in place at the moment, like Care First.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Helen?
Yes, I think, it's a fair point to make. I think, staff have to keep going back to this wellbeing framework, have to feel that they belong and have to feel valued. And I think it's the job of all of us to make sure that happens. But I'm not going to hide the fact that it is not just teaching staff. If in fact, it's not teaching staff that we have the issue with recruitment and retention, it's support staff. And there are a number of things that we've discussed at secondary heads level. One is the challenge that, let's be brutal about this, we've got similar challenges, certainly in the Llinvi Valley, where it costs people to come to work here. There are significant commuting costs associated with coming to Maesteg to work. We are, in my marketing pack, we are just off the M4, but actually that's probably about 20-25 minutes, and it is a significant commute. We do lose out. We have to make our employment route very, very attractive. We invest heavily in developing leadership and CPD and so on and so on. But we are competing now. I've lost a number of outstanding support staff who've been in this school for between 15 and 20 years. They have left to have that wonderful experience of blended working environment, of being able to work from home and sometimes go into the office. That, whereas support, working in a school allowed people to have access to the school holidays, now they can be at home with the children. So that is a real issue for us. And I think what is very apparent is that if I give an example of a school site manager recently, I lost my school caretaker who had the same job title. He is now working in Cardiff for a significantly higher salary. And I think that's something that we have to bear in mind. We have got to be competitive in the job market in Bridgend and be aware that, we should be able to match those salaries and be able to advertise those jobs at those salary scales, because it's a real challenge for us. As I said, I keep saying this, it is not the environment that it used to be in schools. It is still a very, very rewarding environment. I think one of the things I would raise with Councillor Llewellyn is I don't think we do a very good job of promoting the profession, certainly within the media. As teachers, we need to make more of the fact that working in a school is so rewarding. I mean, if the army can get it right, for heaven's sake, it's a brilliant advertising campaign, that, isn't it? Born in Maesteg, made in the Royal Navy, outstanding. We should be able to do something like that. And again, that's being looked at national level. So I do think that Ashley referred to it earlier on, the working from home offer for some of our learning support staff, our catering staff, etc., is too appealing, and that's something that we're losing out a lot at. We're losing out a lot of that level of staff. But I think, we need to do more with recruitment and retention at a national level to enable us to become an attractive choice of occupation then.
Thank you very much, Helen. Councillor Williams?
Thanks very much. Helen touched on what my question was, and it was about the support staff, because we've talked about the well-being of teachers and senior leadership teams, but also the support staff. And I know as a chair of governors, we've lost staff because they can earn more in Tesco's, stacking shelves, and they can earn more in the summer holidays. And these are long-standing, outstanding members of staff who the kids love, who they know the schools. And I think it's going to be a crisis point soon if we cannot fill these staff, the support roles in our schools, because they are key to delivering the requirements, and ensuring well-being is at the forefront. And I think something does need to be done at a national level. And I wonder what we're doing with Welsh Government to look into this, because there has to be something more than this term time working at such a low level of pay. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Would you like to make any comment at all, Councillor Bundle? That's the kind of a political question.
Yeah, we always, whenever I meet with the Minister, or whenever we as the 22 local authority cabinet members, we do meet with the Minister on a regular, I say regular, termly basis. We do always raise learner support. It's one of the top ones, with home to school transport and others that I won't go into now, as they're not part of your question. So we do try and raise it. I know the Welsh Government are looking at some stuff, how they can change it and how they can recruit teachers and recruit learner support. But I other than continue to raise it as I do, that's the level of it. Unfortunately, I don't think the Minister's made any announcements recently on it. So I know they were looking at doing some work on reducing workloads as well during the summer after the strike action last school year. So it is really boils down to that at the moment on a political level. I don't know if Councillor Manuel has any follow-up questions or anything.
Thank you, Councillor Mundle. Councillor Williams, do you have any other further comments before I take a short break?
No, I just think we could look at that in recommendations as what we can do as a committee to try and put pressure on and make it clear that we need to do something before we lose all our support staff in schools.
Absolutely, we do need to incentivise that career choice. So we'll consider that in our conclusions and recommendations. Unless anyone else has got anything more on staffing, then we'll take a short break and resume at 1 p.m, whereby we will start with Councillor Melanie Evans on the review of the framework. Thanks very much.